welcome everybody. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it. So this is the first panel discussion that we had, and as you can see is the name, the evolution of physical access control, technologies, modalities. Is it biometric, mobile, apps, or cards? Who will prevail? So the intention here is to have each of them have sort of their own point of view of who they believe will prevail. I'll add some color as I go through because I can't control myself. But I'll do my best not to talk as much. Is that okay? Sorry, I'll lean into it. And then I've got 3 questions that we'll go through. We're going to skip intros. You can see their names, and they're all here. So afterwards, if you want to get to know them, you can grab them and you can guess who's who on that side. So, all right, we good?
Good.
All right. So if I wanted to jump right into it, given Europe's strict GDPR regulations and heightened privacy concerns, how can organizations balance the convenience of these different credentials and modalities with the compliance challenges of like biometric data and storage? So if I'm somebody that wants convenience and security, how do I balance that? What do I do? Who wants to go first? Steve, you got the mic, so you're going first.
Sure. So there's multiple ways to go around this. One of the obvious ways is for companies who are using mobile credential, which has got biometric built into the ecosystem of the device that you're using. So that's one good way to get around GDPR. Another way is to give your employees multiple factors to be able to do different authentication. So those who don't want to carry identifying devices, as it were, give them the good old traditional prox card, prox fob, whichever way you want to go around it. And then it's really, I think, about education around biometric, because a lot of people think, oh, that's storing my face, that's storing my fingerprint, and it's really not the case. These devices are taking data points and creating a unique code to that person. So the only downside is if somebody gets a backup of that data, then they've got your data point reference number, but they can't reproduce your face or your fingerprint from that. So for me, it's really around education for that customer, rather than actually a GDPR concern, because there's not a concern there from GDPR. These devices take care of that already. It's more so around education of the users.
Great. John, since you have a mic and pass it down, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think just to add to that point with respect to the biometric being on the device itself, I think that's the main one from our perspective, and when we're bringing our products to market, it was a primary concern. I think it's also trying to separate the biometric data from the identity data, so finding ways to keep those on perhaps a separate server so that the two can't be linked, and ensuring that you're using the appropriate certification when you're doing it.
It's interesting to me, and I've said this a couple times, and maybe you guys should speak to it. I do believe the best thing that's happened to biometrics is mobile in a lot of ways. It's gotten people to it, so it sounds very much like that. So Jamie, do you want to speak to your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think a big part of it as well is companies need to treat biometric data not just as a piece of information. It's highly sensitive information, even though, like you said, you're completely right. There's a lot of back-end systems that try and control that for you. But even just down to things like companies taking that biometric data and then not storing that biometric data in a cloud unless that's end-to-end encrypted. And I mean, obviously there are companies out there that do that fantastically. But for example, and I know I touched on this on my last speech, is that at Simpled, with all biometric data, we store that on the local device. We do not put that into the cloud because it just then minimizes any potential risks. So I think it's just about treating that data with the utmost respect and care to make sure that you're not going to risk something going wrong and it coming back to bite you later.
Great. Joe?
Yeah, and from our point of view, and Lee touched on it, mobile, and in particularly wallet, because the GDPR thing is all about how it's stored, and that's all taken care of by Apple and Google. Okay, so from our perspective, and we even have an anonymous credential. Okay, so we have this conversation a lot in Europe specifically, and I've had a few of these conversations lately, where people get very nervous about the whole wallet thing and where that information is being stored and so on. And our answer to that is you can have an anonymous credential, but quite honestly, we do not store a lot of data. Usually it's a first name, a last name, and a credential number. Okay, a lot of the other side is taken care of by your Apples and Googles, and who we already trust with our bank cards and everything else. For me, wallet it covers off a lot of those bases.
What's interesting to me is that if you think about it, though, we are shifting the responsibility to a third-party company, which is a fundamental shift as an industry who has forever controlled a lot of this stuff, right? So I don't have like any. It's something to think about. Like, what are some secondary effects as we do that? But it inevitably believe that that's where it's going. That said, we talk about mobile, and the adoption of it, if we're all being honest, has not necessarily like been wildfire everywhere. We've seen good growth, especially in certain marketplaces, certain verticals. But what are some of the technical and specific maybe market barriers that you all have seen that have gotten in the way of this adoption rate at what we would believe we want it to be? Let's go this way this time. So you go, Joe. You go first.
Yeah, and it's a good question. I think we've seen obviously more interest in the enterprise level when it comes to mobile credentials, and that's to come with the interoperability piece, which these companies that were surrounded by supply great platforms and able to do that. But the other angle on that is that down the chain in the SMB market really hasn't adopted wallet yet. And I think the PACs are slightly behind on what these companies around us have done, and there's an opportunity there from our perspective if they go down this route and make it more affordable. And I think from an SMB point, the advantage is there to do that.
Very good.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's also down to the companies to be able to make sure their policies match up with the things that they need to. So, for example, there are a lot of companies out there that don't have a clear bring your own device policy in place, and not everybody wants to be using their own personal device for something work related or something in that vein. So I think that every company that's doing something like this, it will help the adoption of this technology by making sure that there are clear processes in place to allow people to do this comfortably without needing to risk their own personal data or their own personal device.
Yeah, thanks. Totally agree on the bring your own device thing. That's probably the largest challenge that we come across as a manufacturer selling multiple credential types. So the big thing that comes in is, we've got guys who bring their own device, but the IT team don't want them to bring their own devices in and don't want it anywhere near their network. So there's definitely a barrier there. I think what we will see is with more middleware and where we see much more interconnection between disparate systems, so middleware that's pulling all of that together, there'll be a relaxation around that because actually the middleware is taking care of much of the security management and the workflows that go through that, so that's absolutely something I see. But I also think the main difference between the European market and the US market is that the European market is not already pre-conditioned to those recurring costs, and they see those costs as high, and it's not unique to our industry. We've seen that across, alarm.com being hugely prevalent in the United States but struggle to penetrate in Europe. I think that's also generational, so I think that will change over time. And we're also seeing a lot of platform providers working with the likes of the large enterprise companies like Apple and looking to bring those costs down into single-digit dollars, and I think that will also make quite a big difference moving forward.
For me, I think one of the key issues is the complexity of what we've already got out there in terms of infrastructure and the cost of upgrading that to bring it in line with things like GDPR. I think that one of the biggest challenges, of course, is there's an app for that. Everybody who wants to adopt this technology wants you to download their app, give away your personal data. Not only are people a little bit suspicious of that, it's also time-consuming. And certainly I sort of grew up in the hospitality sector where mobile keys were going to be the next big thing. And adoption has been slow because there's just too much friction. So I think trying to find ways of removing friction from the system and making that upgrade process a little less painful, not only in terms of the process, but also in terms of the cost.
Yeah, I'm curious on that. I feel like when it shifts from taking a card and putting the card in a phone, when you put a card in the phone as the sort of value proposition and that's it, then costs seem high. Whereas when you start to see operational efficiencies and revenue generation opportunities, the cost then starts to seem low. So it might just be a moment in time where we're at. So on that, so if I'm looking ahead 5 to 7 years, which modality do you predict will dominate the European market? Again, 5 years. Go ahead, John, you got the mic.
I think, as we've already touched upon in a lot of the answers, it's going to be mobile. From my perspective, I think it's going to, as the security and the technology improves, we all do more and more with our mobile devices on a daily basis. So for me, I think it's just inevitable that over time, mobile credentials will be the ones that prevail, and especially if they can seamlessly integrate to ID wallets, that'll just speed adoption.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's got to be mobile, I think, unless something comes out that we've not even thought of at this point. It's likely to be mobile in the next 5-7 years. That's the most common use. But again, as businesses, we need to make sure that we remain diligent and that we're consistently increasing our processes as this becomes more and more adopted, to keep that trust in place and to keep the guidelines where they need to be, so that people will be able to take this and actually use it comfortably without worry.
Joe?
Yeah, again, it's got to be mobile. You're right, trust is a thing. I think the security's there. I think it is just a trust thing, certainly here in the UK and Europe. But I think it's an education piece there about wallet. I think if you look at it, I still carry a wallet, a physical wallet. If you asked me the last time I took my card out my wallet to use it, I couldn't tell you. My son doesn't carry a wallet. He's 18, all he uses is his driving license. And later this year, driving license will be going digital. So it's an evolution thing and a generational thing. It's going to happen. Everything. Your wallet is your wallet, and that will be on your device.
So I'm going to go against the flow a little bit on this one.
I was waiting for one. Thank you.
From my perspective, I don't think there will be, out of those three modalities, so card, biometric, and mobile, I don't see a dominant modality. Actually, I think there will be more than enough space in the market for all three. I actually expect to see far greater demand for contactless biometric. I think facial will become a big thing, and probably gesture-based access control, even down to crazy things where maybe doors aren't even locked until you approach. So I think there'll be lots of different changes moving over the next 5 to 7 years. I think we'll undoubtedly see an increase in mobile, especially around wallet. I think that will evolve even further with wearables rather than just traditional phone-based wallet. So yeah, for me, not one dominant. I think there'll be three, and there's room for all. But we can't sit on our laurels, because if we do, other platform providers will come in and eat our lunch. So that's where we've got to be as an industry.
Yeah, no, we've focused on it, and I think what's happening, and what you're all speaking to, though, in this, is that there's a modality of choice based off of the user experience that you need to have at this space. I think from a dominant standpoint, if you see markets in where visitors have been, where the visitor experience of mobile has been there, the adoption increases immensely. So in some cases in hospitality, depending on what market you're in. The other one that's not on here that I do see even increasing as well is QR code, right? We don't talk a lot about it because depending on which market you're in, it's sort of already a preconceived notion that QR code is insecure. But in a lot of cases, like in the Japanese marketplace, you see it used in hospitality, you see it used in commercial. I mean, even in that marketplace, they're selling readers that with 3M tape, where they tape it to the wall, and you can buy them at a local hardware store. Markets like India, where QR codes are highly prevalent, utilized because of pay, adoption again is impacting what has been traditionally our market is no longer just our market. and the modality of choice is now, what do you need? What do you have? Which in a lot of ways is solution-based selling. I want to open up. Are there any questions? Anybody? You've got the gentleman here. Anybody have their thoughts too? You're allowed to also participate. Anything? We can pass the mic here. Take that.
Thank you. Well, maybe a quick question regarding mobiles and different variants of using these. Maybe you highlighted the QR code, there is NFC, there is Bluetooth, there are wallets, there are apps. So what's your view on all these options, and where do you use which of these might be the most useful? And
I think is that working? Sorry. So I think again there is a place for all of these things. We always talk about BLE, and we talk about how it was adopted for access control. It wasn't built for access control. Whereas wallet and NFC, was more built for that security market. But I still see from a mobile access piece, I still think wallet will take away BLE over time. And I just think that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think some are definitely more difficult to secure than others. So I say this all the time as well, because people ask, for example, with our smart locks, is can they be hacked? The way that cars are being hacked, and you look at a company like Range Rover, a massive company, and they added a feature that they thought people wanted, but they probably didn't actually want, which was proximity, and that's where you're emitting a frequency that the car will automatically unlock, and you can get in and drive away. But the issue with that is when you're emitting that frequency, it's very hard to encrypt that to the point where, you heard these criminals that were picking up these things on eBay for $5,000, sitting in a car park, waiting for someone to turn up in one of these cars. While they're in the shop, they nick that frequency, get in the car and drive away. So there are certainly going to be, I think you're right, there's a space for all of them, but as you said, we can't rest on our laurels. We need to consistently be on top of what we're doing to make sure that these are still valid forms of modality.
Thanks. So yeah, I would agree. So if you look at QR codes, for example, then there's no doubt that for temporary visitor management, it's absolutely kind of the dominating technology, if you like, that exists around there. And platforms now are able to generate, multiple QR codes so that you mitigate the security risk around issuing one that's available for a few hours at a time. So that's there. Again, customers are still using apps and BLE. Why? Well, because they haven't got recurring costs and other things going on, and that comes back to the total cost of ownership and efficiency improvements that Lee was talking around earlier. For me, if I was looking at mobile credentials seriously as part of an organization, then I would be strongly considering wallet and how best to roll that out across the organization, because there are many security benefits to that. And if we think about access control, one of the most important things is to be able to revoke someone's access control, somebody's access rights at any point in time, immediately. And that's something that wallet gives you the capability of doing there, then live, straight away. And if you lose your phone, then you tell Apple, hey, phone's lost, it's cut off the credential. So there are some significant security advantages to wallet over BLE. There are some significant price advantages from an initial perspective of BLE over wallet. So I can be agnostic because we do all of those things, so it's easy for me.
I think, the only thing I would add to that is that cost will prevail. And I think certainly I would agree with the consensus that wallet is probably the way forward. But everybody's trying to get a piece of the pie, and everybody wants to try and make money out of this. And I think it's trying to find that sweet spot whereby everybody can make their money, but the end user or the end customer doesn't feel like they're being squeezed at all ends. And I think that adoption will very much depend upon this.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is I think the way we're talking about it currently now is an incremental step off a high security. So the way we're treating this is that it's, like I said, incremental. Where if you look at historically as an industry, any of the products that we had here were basically applied whether you're an airport or a local restaurant. You just kind of used less of this system or more of this system. Whereas now, as we shift to more of an, I think more like an enterprise software industry, where you're going to be applying the technology to that application and whatever experience that you want to have. We haven't even gotten to things like UWB, for those you're familiar with that, coming into play, where that's going to change the way experience happens as well. And it's going to come down to, like, are you a commercial real estate building? Here's the way you want your system to operate. Are you a restaurant? Are you a K through 12? Whatever it might be. Those different applications are going to change, and I think you'll be able to apply solution-based selling, which is not necessarily, we've been doing project-based selling. It's going to shift the solution, and those different modalities will follow the experience that you want to have at the end. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. It's the early innings of this type of conversation, frankly. I guarantee you, a year from now, when you come back to this expo hall, it's going to look very different. If you look at what just came out of ISC West in Las Vegas, Nevada last week, it was fundamentally different from last year to here. It's a couple years, I would say, ahead in some areas with some of that we're talking about here, where the modalities were there. Everybody there had mobile already on that end, so you started to see the conversations now around more around the biometrics, video with access on that end. So I would imagine you'll start to see more of that here. But the good news is for you all, high levels of curiosity around this. The questions and asking and getting engaged is frankly what, as an industry, that we need. And these are a lot of the people that are starting to drive a lot of that adoption of the market. So thank you all very much for taking the time. Thank you all for being here and participating. All right. Thank you.